Hey, I'm just over here with my new setup, trying to get everything all set up. Let me mod you. Yeah, I remember to do it. Hey, everybody on Instagram, it says they're telling everybody I'm live. No notifications coming through on these joints. We're good. Hey, everybody. Where are my cards? Woo! Y'all can't see me on Clubhouse, but I got new lights. Everything is all set up. Hopefully it's working. I think everything is working. I might need a little bit more volume on the microphone here. If I can pull this down, let's see. Ooh, that might fall. Oh my God. There we go. There we go. All right, let me get my cards. Probably should have got those before I sat down, but we're making it work today. Hey, everybody on Instagram. Let me just send a little tweet up on here. And then we could go ahead and get started. Okay. Hey everybody, it's me, Dayna Lynn Nuckolls, the People's Oracle, the Sidereal Astrologer, here with your March 2021 new moon meet reading. I must say, I'm very excited about this because, well, I was telling Winter earlier that I'm so excited about every time we come to Aquarius, because I am 100. Oh, y'all. Okay, y'all can't even hear me because I have myself muted. Okay, I was talking to YouTube, talking to Instagram, telling y'all about how I get so excited about the reading for the new moon in Aquarius every year because I feel like Aquarius is the sign that has been shafted the most, hands down, by tropical astrology. It is the sign that has been given the least substance, the most fluff. It has been the container for all of the new age nonsense. And I just wonder if they have ever met anybody who's Aquarius in real life, is the question. like, have you really ever met anybody who's Aquarius in real life? I don't know. So I'm gonna pull up my notes here because I actually started prepping for this reading like right after the last one. I don't know if y'all saw the reading for the full moon in Leo, but that really was one of my favorite, if not best, readings I've ever done. It's evergreen, meaning that even though the reading I gave was for a specific time, it is applicable for a long time. So watch that. Broke down decolonization. And I was so high off that reading that I actually started prepping for this reading like the next day. So I have notes here and I'm going to pull them up. Y'all give me a moment. And I also, a bunch of y'all, I'm certain, have received your printed and bound 2021 Sidereal Astrology Guide. Shout out to my ancestors. Shout out to United States Postal Service for doing their job and getting these printed and bound guides to you all in the time they promised. And thank you all for waiting so patiently. So if you have yours, whether you have a digital copy or you have a printed copy, this is our text for today. So make sure you pull that out. And actually, I am going to double up on my readings here from this book. Let me give y'all a little background first. Let me give you just a general talk about Aquarius, and then I will dig into this, and then I will dig in my notes. So those of us who, had some kind of knowledge of astrology before we came to Sidereal have some understanding of Aquarius that we've gotten from Tropical. This understanding is whack. It's really shallow, and it's just not fair, I think, is really the point I'm trying to make here. That Aquarius is new age and big brother and humanitarian and kumbaya and into all of the new age woo-woo stuff. And I just want to know, where did they get it from? I'm kind of speechless, because the gap between how Tropical explains Aquarius and how it's actually experienced or witnessed or embodied in real life the gap is so large. And so when I don't want to say discovered Sidereal, because I did not discover it, but when I began to explore the Sidereal zodiac, Aquarius was this sign that I would be giving the crazy face to, because I literally had no reference point. And it was really Aquarius that led me to kind of unpacking and teasing out of the Sidereal zodiac this consistent logic. So let's start with the consistent logic, that Aquarius is a sign whose planetary ruler is Saturn. And we know that Saturn is reality. Now, this is where we get kind of tripped up, because reality comes in two shapes, two forms. It comes in the material reality that we inhabit and we embody. And we know what is real, what is materially real, based on the material consequences of our encounter with it. And that's really the earth side of Capricorn, which we've been living with like we've never lived with it before since January of 2020, okay? So Saturn as death, Saturn as real, concrete, tangible, experienced limitations that we inhabit. Now, there's another kind of reality, and this is consensual reality. And I actually think that this reality, in terms of our perceptions, in terms of how we see and understand things, is more powerful than material reality. Conceptual and consensual reality is so powerful that you could be literally experiencing something physically to your body, and because the consensual agreed upon meaning and framework for what you are experiencing is so different than what you're physically experiencing that you can't even see what you're experiencing, right? We literally witnessed and are currently experiencing this with COVID, right? That we are introduced all of these ideas about what COVID is and who it impacts. Yet, we literally experience the death of our loved ones. We experience the collapse of our systems. We experience loss and grief on a mass scale. Yet our agreement about what reality is so powerful that we don't even believe the death that we are experiencing and witnessing. From the first person narratives of nurses who were in COVID wards, that people would literally be on their deathbed, gasping for air, taking their last breath, unable to accept the fact that they're dying from COVID. Why? What is this thing that is so powerful that it can conceal from us the material consequences of the reality we're experiencing in that moment? I'm going to come back to that, okay? Now, the other piece of Aquarius in terms of a conceptual reality, right? First, we talk about consensual reality. This is what we agree something is. This is what something appears to be to us individually or collectively based upon what we agree it is, right? The other piece is really conceptual in terms of technology. I actually was looking up charts of people who had Aquarius really prominently placed. I'm going to come back to Karl Marx, but the chart and biography that I was reading this morning was that of Alexander Graham Bell. Alexander Graham Bell was both Aquarius rising sun and Saturn. What else did he have there? Yeah, Aquarius rising sun and Saturn. That is a lot of Aquarius. And we know Alexander Graham Bell because he invented what eventually became the telephone. Like, he got the patent for the first telephone. Now, some folks say that, you know, he stole it and all of these other things. We're not having that conversation today. However, if you read his biography, it's not far-fetched that he would be into this technical conceptual thing, right? Part of the motivation actually for why he was so adamant about this particular invention was twofold. One was his father was an elocutionist, right? This is someone who teaches people, studies and writes about pronunciation and articulating words for the purposes of being heard and understood and speaking. And then the second piece is that both his mother and his eventual wife were deaf, right? So a lot of his research had to do with trying to figure out how he could communicate with his deaf loved ones and what kind of technologies he could create for that, right? So I brought up this example just because I wanted to give you guys a really kind of clear idea of what Aquarius is really about. Aquarius is about conceptual reality, right? What we imagine and conceive. Conceive means to give birth to in our imagination, our mind's eye, not what we may actually be witnessing with our physical eyes, not what we may actually be experiencing with our physical bodies, but what we imagine something to be based on our conception. We give birth to it in the mind, and we project what we give birth to in the mind onto what we're witnessing and experiencing, okay? And then this lends itself very well to concepts and technology. So interestingly, if you look at the charts of really creative people, especially when it comes to music, these are people who actually have Aquarius pretty prominently in their birth charts, right? Being a musician really is about technology, right? The technology of your body, the technology of your hands, and the technology that you use in order to create sound, record sound, all of these things. Now, the theme for today, the word I have for today comes from something that I introduced in my talk on 2021 that I gave back in December. And it's also in the 2021 Sidereal Astrology Guide. And this is about the sign Aquarius. It is about the impending transit of Jupiter through Aquarius. And I named this What Makes a Person, right? Now, obviously, the most logical, straightforward answer to this question is that a human is a person. However, this is not an original idea that I'm going to say, but I might be saying it in an original way. But that when we talk about what makes a person, we're talking about personhood. And personhood is a designation given to or stripped from humans. Sometimes personhood is given to people and things who are not human. Personhood has rights and privileges that are granted by the state, that are granted by a community, that are granted in relationship and interpersonal interaction. And that the personhood, the rights and privileges of personhood that are granted by the state trickle down through our communal relations, our interpersonal relations and relationships, right? Personhood grants you protections. Personhood grants you rights. Personhood grants you privileges. And so personhood becomes very valuable political capital. That if you are granted personhood, if an entity or creature is granted personhood, it means they are granted protection, rights, and benefits from the state. If you are stripped of your personhood, that means you are stripped of rights, protections, privileges from the state. Y'all with me so far? Okay. So I'm turning to April actually. And I'm gonna read, there's 3 paragraphs here that I'm gonna read from the April monthly summary in the 2021 Sidereal Astrology Guide. If you don't have that, the link is in the description of this video on YouTube. The link is in my bio on Twitter. You can go to thepeoplesoracle.com and click shop, and you will find both the printed and bound version and the PDF download version available for purchase there. Okay? If you have yours, open up to April, please. Scroll to April, flip to April, whatever you got here. All right. So it says here, Jupiter brings cyclical shifts to the context for how we make sense of our experiences, ourselves, and the world. Now, Jupiter enters Aquarius for the first time since 2009. So Jupiter enters Aquarius on April 5th, 2021. And the new moon in Aquarius today is a prelude, a setup, laying the groundwork, marking the pathway of a story that we're going to be following, not only for the next 6 months, which is the first part of Jupiter in Aquarius's transit, but really through 2026. I want to be clear here because this is not a short-term story. This is not something that we're just watching for the next few weeks. This is something we're watching for the next 5 to 6 years. And that is because Jupiter will be in Aquarius 2021 to 2022. Saturn enters Aquarius 2022 and remains there until 2025. And then we have eclipses in Aquarius and Leo, I believe 2024 through 2026. So this Aquarius house in your birth chart is about to get that work. Okay? Yeah, this is just a big deal. Okay? Aquarius is the sign of self-determination. It uses words to name and reclaim identity. It is the essential idea that determines the self you perceive. This transit asks us, what makes a person a person? Who defines personhood and how does one qualify as such? Mars in Aquarius, May through June 2020, so last year, laid the foundation for activity occurring in your Aquarius house between 2020 and 2025. I should really say 2026. At that time, Mars reflected disruption via a radical moment of self-determination. Who remembers what was going on May through June of 2020 in America that spread all over the world? Okay? Jupiter, however, comes to fundamentally change and evolve the context. Context means what can you know about something not by directly perceiving, but from the impact that it has. Okay? So Jupiter, however, comes to fundamentally change and evolve the context for how you understand your Aquarius house topics and relationships. Who defines who and what you are? Who designates your race, your gender, your class, your sexual identity? Who defines what those designations mean? Ultimately, these identities are the building blocks of power hierarchies of authority. This question of what makes a person is not an intellectual exercise in political thinking. This is a matter of life and death. If personhood is something that can grant you the privileges of protection from the state, that implies that if you are not granted personhood, you are not granted protection from the state. In fact, the stripping of or withholding of personhood is the means by which the state oppresses you with impunity. Okay? Now, I've been talking a lot about race and gender and class and sexuality. I've been talking a lot about blackness and patriarchy and misogyny. And as I was thinking about Aquarius, I was really thinking about a few different things. I was thinking first about language, right? Aquarius and all air signs, right? If you have the Reading Your Sidereal Birth Chart workshop, you know that air signs or air is one of many tools that you can have in your chart, in your toolkit, that's given to you by specific experiences. And we know that air primarily is language. It's words, it's symbols, and it's also the imagination. So language constructs and shapes reality. Language has the power to tell you what something is without you seeing it or experiencing it yourself, right? So if I am identifying as a woman and someone says, hey, there's a man banging on your door, I don't have to have seen, witnessed, or experienced that person banging on my door in order to conjure up images and feelings in reaction to that. In fact, by merely stating it's a man, I am going to not consciously and not intentionally conjure up a narrative about the possible outcomes of this man banging on my door and what that means. So again, language constructs and shapes reality, and it tells me what something is without seeing it or experiencing it myself. Right? Language and the symbolism of images go together very, very, very well. That if I am constantly fed a specific set of words and a specific set of symbols implying that this is a statement about me, I'm going to internalize all of that. So by the time I'm old enough to make a connection between the word black and the concept idea of black, I have already internalized the conception of blackness that has nothing to do with who I actually am in the ways that I've experienced it. This is how you can internalize anti-blackness and be black. This is how you can internalize misogyny and identify as a woman, right? That you don't have to have experienced something in order for the language to have an impact for you. So as you can already see, this connects very well to a theme that we had 2017 through 2020 called Words Mean Things, right? Because that was for Gemini, another air sign, talking about the political consequences of word and language. And so Aquarius is talking to us about the political consequences of survival based on language. We know that there are words that can incite violence, and there are words that can incite a communal sense of belonging. And if those words are directed towards a particular identity, they have the power to grant or strip personhood, right? The other piece here, and I want to read directly from my notes here, because again, this is one of those things that feels like, well, duh, but I I don't know about that. Okay? Self-determination goes beyond defining what it means to identify within a certain racial group, gender, designation, or sexual identity. Self-determination strips away all of these labels, all of these constructs. And it's about actually making a determination of what actually is a person. So we have these conversations and we say Black Lives Matter. And that's cool, right? I don't know if that is a plea to the state, if it is a mantra of self-affirmation. I'm not sure. But the issue, I think, in a phrase like Black Lives Matter is that it has allowed power hierarchies who have created race as a construct to determine the framework for how we even save our own lives. What do I mean by that? I mean that self-determination is not whether a race or group of people's lives matter. It is about why race is a determinant of survival to begin with. Why does race cause anyone to make assumptions about who and what I am? What is this construct? Why is it a given? Why is it a given? Why is it a subject of conversation? Now, this is not about I don't see black, and this is not about being colorblind. This is going beyond saying Black Lives Matter to challenging the construct of race itself. What is the function of race? What is the purpose of race? We already know what the function of race and the purpose of race is. It is a primary tool of racial capitalism used to create caste systems. It's used to create a caste which fundamentally gives personhood to some as well as its rights and privileges and strips personhood from others. So to say Black Lives Matter to an institution, to a system of power is futile, because black does not mean person as far as they're concerned. Black is not person. So you say Black Lives Matter, what is a black life? I've never seen one before. Every single image I've received as a black person and as a non-black person, a white person, definitely has not portrayed blackness as personhood. It has portrayed blackness as labor and capital, whether it is on the sports teams of colleges and universities, or the NBA, or the NFL, or at the Grammys, or on the television. Blackness is not personhood. Blackness is capital for America to ensure its imperial agenda abroad. So saying Black Lives Matter, that doesn't compute. What is it? Your Nintendo's in your bed. That doesn't compute. Self-determination is not about what makes someone a legitimate man or makes someone a legitimate woman, but questioning why someone's genitals are relevant to anything but sex between the consensual parties that are participating in it. So the question, the conversation is not about who's really a woman and who's really a man, and can you tell if they're really a woman, and well if she got a dick then it's a right. Allowing oppressors to determine the framework determines the questions that you ask within that framework. With you can't see the framework. I got the book on the shelf. Hold on. I'm gonna read you the tweet real quick. Hold on, because I tweeted this the other day. This is from The Invention of Women. And the author was actually quoting a book, another book in her book, and I don't remember the name of that. So the quote is from page 13 of The Invention of Woman. When we are busy arguing about the questions in a certain frame, the frame itself becomes invisible. We become inframed within it. So the question in terms of gender is, are you a real man? No, I mean, no, like when you were born, do you have a penis or a vagina? That's erasing the frame. The frame is gender as a legitimate means for determining who's actually a person granted rights and privileges by the state. Why does someone's genitals have anything to do with anything other than what genitals are used for? Peeing and sexing. Why is gender a construct? Why does it exist? Why is it allowed to make a statement about who gets health care? Who can play on what sports team? Who can use what bathroom? Why is this the part of the conversation? Then we say self-determination is, in terms of sexuality, is not about which forms of giving and receiving pleasure are morally right between enthusiastic consenting adults, but why is one's pleasure preference? Why is one's source of joy and love and community and belonging and friendship and intimacy and connection and companionship? Why are any of those things a determinant of whether or not someone can visit a loved one in the hospital on their deathbed? Why is it relevant to anything other than what consensual adults do between each other? I don't understand this. And when we frame our resistance within the context of assuming that gender is a given, assuming that race is a given, assuming that heterosexuality is a given, that white is the norm, that male is entitled to power and authority, like when we ask questions granting legitimacy to the social construct itself, that's not radical. When we shape and form our own identities within the binaries and constructs that they give to us, they're saying these are the only things that can make you a real person, Pinocchio, right? You have to pick from these boxes. And once you pick from these boxes, are you Black, white, Native, Hispanic? Are you Indigenous, Alaskan? Are you male or female? Are you gay or straight? Only these choices are legitimate persons. Everything else, I can't see it. I don't know you exist. You're not real. And you're so not real to me that if I catch a glimpse of you in my view, I'm going to destroy you so that I can continue believing that you're not real. I brought up Karl Marx earlier. Karl Marx, we know him for being the author of the Communist Manifesto and many other works. Aquarius rising with Saturn in Aquarius. Karl Marx died a stateless man, meaning he was not recognized as a person by any government or monarchy in the world. For a white man in the 1800s, that's a big deal. What was so wild and crazy about Karl Marx that not one singular government would acknowledge him as a person? No land to be bequeathed to his children, right? Because these are the privileges white men are trying to get, right? No government support, health care, entitlements. What are the rights and privileges of personhood in your family? What are the rights and privileges of personhood in your community? What about your country to your government? What are the requirements for being a real person in your country? And if you are not a real person, what happens to you? I'm getting kind of emotional, like thinking about this, because it seems like one of those daunting things that feels impossible to fully dismantle. It feels like a prison. If we really get down to it, this is really interesting, right? Like, we have these conversations about, well, who makes more money in capitalism? White men, then black men. No, right. Then white women, then black women, then Hispanic men, then Hispanic women, something like that, right? And rather than rewind, those questions are asked with the assumption that capitalism is a viable, for granted means by which humans are entitled to have their needs met. That's a problem. That's a problem. Because then we're talking about equal pay rather than talking about dismantling capitalism. I don't want any rights and privileges from capitalism. I don't want them. I don't want capitalism. How can we broaden and expand our minds and our political consciousness to escape this framework of the check boxes available to us to define personhood? Why is gender? Why is race? Why is sexuality for class purposes? Hold on. I gotta adjust my microphone here before it falls over, right? Ooh. Hold on, y'all. Just a moment. when you're producer and talent. I don't know, man. What do we have to look forward to? What are we really looking forward to? Some of the themes, obviously, I mean, you know, this time period where we are beginning again, this story of Aquarius connects back to May and June of 2020. And that was when our dear ancestor George Floyd was murdered by Derek Chauvin on camera for everyone to see. And now the jury is being chosen for Derek Chauvin's case. And the questions the jurors are being asked have been circulated. They want us to burn it down. Like I'm convinced that they didn't get enough last year. Like I'm totally convinced that that's what they want. I mean, the questions were so obviously biased in terms of race and opinions about police. So for the record, right? Like this Aquarius story is about race, but it's also about immigration, which cannot be divorced from climate change, which cannot be divorced from America's imperialist ambitions across the globe. Because anywhere where anyone is escaping to come to America is probably because of America. Right? What makes a person a person? Do you have to have a driver's license? Do you have to own property? Do you get to vote? Well, who gets to vote? Only real persons. Well, what are real persons? Not black. Everything goes back to class and this caste system. Everything goes back to capitalism and personhood, meaning who has a right to sell their labor on the capitalist market. Citizens United granted personhood to corporations, saying that spending money is a form of speech. And so who and what corporations spend their money on is protected by the Constitution. That's a person. What are the rights and privileges of personhood? Gerrymandering effectively neuters communities' ability to choose their representation in leadership. Personhood has to do with our capacity to amass political power with people who share the same political agenda as we do. Right? Personhood grants you rights to health care. I mean, we can really go through this with a fine-tooth comb. If you graduated college but you don't yet have a job, well, you're not a person to the insurance companies. You're invisible, don't exist. I don't have to insure you. Government says, ooh, I can't help you, right? So now we see that there's some laws in place, right, to help fill in those gaps. But understand that policy, grants personhood. I'm shuffling my cards here. Y'all can't tell, and maybe because it's all this Aquarius, I'm really enraged on the inside. But I'm not going off today. Maybe. Okay, let's draw some cards. Let's draw some cards, everybody. Knight of Cups. I don't know if y'all can see this on my... Can y'all see this? Here we go. I be trying to make it focus on my camera. Y'all can see it. Knight of Cups. Knights are compelled. They're led by. They are driven by. Something in them is There's an unction, a calling, a pulling forward, a compulsion, and something's impelling them. And for the Knight of Cups, we are talking about water, which is the body, which is our needs, which is our desires. The Knight of Cups really makes me think about kind of the unconscious ways that our bodies seek to get our needs met. And our bodies seek to get their needs met without an awareness of the complex network of relationships and bureaucracies and red tape, right? We do what we have to do to survive. I also love to see this card for this idea that liking it, desiring it, wanting it is reason enough. Particularly for those, which is really all of us, who have been given these messages that if it's not making you any money, what are you doing it for? That if it's not leading you to an increase in the value of your labor, what is its function? What is it for? In capitalism, everything is capital. Everything is either supporting or undermining the value of your labor. And that the goal in capitalism is to have the most valuable labor. And the value of your labor is defined and designated and determined by the boxes you are given the choices to check. Male or female, white, black, indigenous, Hispanic. Same-sex loving, opposite-sex loving. Each of these constructs are ultimately to value your labor. And so we end up fighting over the constructs rather than fighting over the fact that the valuing of labor is tied to meeting our survival needs. Where do we get to desire? Where do we get to want? Where do we get to feel? Where do we get to joy? How? Four of Pentacles. The world. What the world needs now. Love. Sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. Seven of Cups. That is quite an interesting set of cards here. Whenever I see a heavy card like the world in the middle of a 3-card spread, this really becomes a point of transformation, right? This becomes kind of an anchor in the reading, a pivot point, that there is something before the world and there is something after the world. So understanding what the world represents helps us understand this pivot point, this transformation, this place or this experience or thing where there is a before and there is an after. So before we define the before and after, let's talk about the world. The world is a culmination. It's sometimes like a graduation, but if we strip any moral or value judgments from the world as a good or bad card, as a awesome graduation, you made it, right? If we just look at the world as completion, as a logical conclusion you come to at the end of the road. It's like if you matriculate through school, you get all the way to 12th grade, that's it. That's it. You're done. Maybe you graduate, maybe you don't, maybe you repeat 12th grade, maybe you drop out, I don't know. Right? But it's a completion. It's the end. Right? You take any particular road and eventually the road ends. Either you're going to run into another road or you're going to run into the ocean. That's really the only choices we have here. So the world is about inevitable ends and completions. Depending on the context, this completion can be great. If you've longed for marriage, you've reached the end of your singlehood for now. If you've longed for the next phase in your life, the completion of one stage can be positive. But also, if you were hoping there was more value or time to be extracted from an experience or thing, the world says, that's it. It's complete now. If you were hoping there was more, if you were hoping there was an additional opportunity, the world says it's complete. It's finished. It's done. If you were hoping that something would last forever, the world says no, it's done. And this is not death, right? This is not a loss in terms of something ceasing to exist. It does have some connotations of it's time to grow up. Once someone with a uterus has their first menstrual cycle, that's it. Like, you don't get to go back to being prepubescent, right? Once menopause hits, you don't get to go back to being in your childbearing times, right? Once a child is born, you're not going back in the womb, right? Like, these are the kinds of completions that are inevitable, right? Like, this is just what it is. And I would like to think of this card broadly in the sense that there comes a moment in the life span of any person, place, or thing where it can no longer continue forward in a state it's in, right? You have these steps, these graduated steps, or these markers along the way to show you how far you've come, and that at some point, that's it. And I wonder, how does this World card, within the context of this Knight of Cups that we saw on the bottom, how is this World card letting us know that the ways that we have met our needs up until this moment, it's complete? Now, let's look at the before the World and look at the after. Before, we have the Four of Pentacles. Protection, boundaries, very much mine. No, you can't have any, you're too close, stay away. When this card comes up in readings with clients, especially relationship readings, I'll be like, listen, friend, you need some boundaries. You need to protect yourself, your space, your emotional, psychic, everything. Because sometimes folks like to play tag with your feelings. And come and tag you and be like, tag, you're it. And now they've aroused these feelings in you they have no intention of nourishing. You're left holding the bag for the responsibility of aroused feelings without any reciprocation because you've left yourself open. So let's transfer that to this reading today. This boundaries and self-protection, right? This sense of holding on to what you value, of being closed off, sometimes necessarily, sometimes as a matter of safety, as a matter of survival. But it can often be like a toddler who's saying, mine, no, mine, won't share, tight gripped fist. We know things cannot grow in that condition. Eventually, the seed must break through the skin and the husk of its shell. Eventually, it must break through the surface of the soil. And it's being beckoned by the light. Once that little sprout comes out the seed, it's not going back. And it can either die in the process towards maturation, it can give up, or it can move through the growing pains and difficulties of having to leave behind its past self. What growing pains are you going through? What past self must you leave behind? What certain things or anything, to be honest, you can't unknow them. Once you see things, you cannot unsee them. And you can long for the innocence and naivety and even ignorance of not knowing. But you have already been changed by the knowledge that you have. Your awareness has already been transformed and you cannot go back. I get a lot of these images of America really going through puberty at this moment. Understanding that only infants expect this kind of on-demand meeting of its needs. This entitlement that just by merely existing in my helpless state, feed me someone, clothe me someone, bathe me someone. I'm not talking about you. Because that's not how you live your life. Right? I'm talking about the real capitalist. I'm talking about paying somebody to wipe your ass for you if you could. Right? This is a kind of greed, a kind of indulgence that requires stripping the personhood of other people. This requires for the humanity of others to be made invisible and non-existent to you, so that in effect, blackness, womanhood, and queerness become euphemisms for you are not a real person to me. Therefore, if I harm you, I have no empathy, no conscious objection, no guilt, because you are not a real person. When I see your black or brown or yellow skin, that lets me know you're not really a human, so I can treat you however I want to treat you. I don't feel any guilt about that. You're gay. Gay is not a person. You're an animal. You're a beast. And so if I bash your head in, I don't feel any ways about it because you're not a human to me. Right? So when we're talking about personhood, this is not about a checkbox on a piece of paper. This is not about acknowledge me, see me, please. Why is it that you can't see me? I'm standing in front of your face. And to those who do the erasing, right? Let's throw that in here really quickly. The wound of Aquarius is erasure. You do not exist. You are merely a projection screen for me to maintain my power and authority. I see what I want to see. You are who I say you are. However you see yourself, however you think you may be, is not real. So here comes the propaganda. Here comes the gaslighting. Here comes the brainwashing. Here comes the you trying to figure out WTF is going on, because I'm looking at my body, seeing it real and it existing, and yet somehow this person cannot see me. So remember at the beginning, I talked about language. And I talked about language creating an image of who or what something is without you having to experience it yourself. And so we bring these labels of language and we superimpose them onto people. And what happens when the person in front of you does not fit neatly into the label, the language that you've superimposed: mother, daughter, son, father, worker? What happens? Where does that person go? Where do you go? When your state does not see you, do you cease to exist? Where do you go when your mother cannot see the person who is in front of your face? Do you cease to exist? For some people, in their own minds, they do cease to exist. They drown in the projections of other people. They suffocate and they cannot breathe. Their sense of self becomes further and further and further fractured, to the point they can't tell what's really them and what's the projection. Until just for a moment, someone comes along and sees you. And that drive to recede back into invisibility is really, really strong. We all experience this. When we code switch, this is a tool of survival. Code switch can mean changing the way that I speak in order to be perceived as articulate and smart to the observer, usually a white person, because if I really talk how I really talk, right, they may make assumptions about my level of education. They may make assumptions about my competency. They may make assumptions about my character and whether I'm a violent or peaceful person. Code switching might be, I'm going to appear very heterosexual because it is not safe for me to really be my queer self who loves to wear whatever I want to wear. Code switching can be being a trans person and hiding my transness because it is not safe for me to reveal the truth of how I embody my identity and the ways that I like to perform my identity, right? But after a while, it becomes violently detrimental to the psyche of the person who is being demanded to code switch to survive. And some folks eventually, some folks never, come to a point where they decide that the violence of erasure is not worth their sanity. I want you all to apply this broadly. Look in your Aquarius house. Look at the house opposite it. Look at those two topics in relationship to each other. Your Aquarius house can talk to you about how and where you've been made invisible, where and how you've been erased, the impact of that erasure on how you show up in that particular area of your life. Who has done the erasing? You don't need your birth chart for that, I can tell you. Your parents, your community, your church, your government. They have erased you. And you spend your whole life looking for bits and pieces of yourself to be sewn back together, only to get to the point of actually being seen and it feels like you're naked on the corner. Have you ever really seen yourself? Who are you? Who defines who and what you are? So as we collectively move through this puberty as a nation, as I wouldn't even say as a nation, I would really say as all being in a world which is the fabrication of a European settler colonialist nation, set of nations, right? I mean, the Dutch, the French, the English, the Portuguese, and the Spanish colonized the whole world. And wherever we live in the world, for the most part, has been colonized. And they colonized us using the social constructs of race, gender, class, and sexuality in order to keep us in order, keep us in line. And those social constructs infiltrated the ways that we relate to each other on an interpersonal, familial, and communal level, so that our colonizers came in with the big eraser and we took the eraser out of their hands and turned it onto ourselves and erased ourselves. And then we turned it onto each other and erased each other. And we bludgeoned and beat those who didn't fit into the check boxes that we were given. So we are all together as a human community going through this puberty of how long will you erase yourself? I mean, if you think about it, when you turn about 14, right? I always relate the sign Aquarius to the Saturn opposition that occurs anywhere between like 13, 14, 15 years old. And at that time, the task of the Saturn opposition is differentiation of self. It's about self-exploration, and it's our first taste of self-definition. It's our first taste of touching and feeling the boundaries of the world around us and seeing our place in it, not just in relationship to our families. And some of us get to that Saturn opposition and we are stifled by our caregivers and we are kept from the explorations. We're kept in line by religion. We're kept in line by the constructs of race. Our sexuality is policed. Just as we are becoming aware of pleasure, we are immediately internalizing the expectation to erase our pleasure, to erase your cravings and longings, to hide. Not because sex is a private act, but because your sex is shameful. No matter who your pleasure may desire. So collectively, all of this Aquarius culminating, the last time in history where we had this kind of hardcore Aquarius focus, at least in America, was during the 1860s, that last half of the 19th century. Right? Seven of Cups talks about the ambivalence. Oftentimes it's very difficult to leave behind the known unless you have a predefined path before you telling you which direction to go. It's very easy. You graduate high school and you go to college, and after college you get a job, and after you get a job you get married, and after you get married you have kids, and after you have kids you raise them, and then they give you grandchildren, and then you become a grandparent, and then you retire, and then happy ending for everyone. You guys know that's not how it goes. You know that's not how this goes. You were lied to. You were lied to. There is no path. The path was for white men who were born into wealth. Maybe a few broke through. But if you could assimilate to whiteness, white maleness, white male heterosexuality, you just might have a chance. And here we all are in 2021, still trying to be as close to white as right as possible. Yeah, you can wear your natural hair. You can perform your heterosexuality for all of the world to see. Look at your Instagram page. Is that truly you? Why do you care? Because the value of your labor gets depreciated should you not get as close to white maleness as possible. I mean, this is the bottom line of all of this. Personhood is about whose labor is worth the most. Why are we not having the conversation about why my labor is what my personhood is for? Why is it that I am seeking only to increase the value of my labor? That's another conversation for another day. Let me talk about this Seven of Cups so I can end this sermon today. Seven of Cups talks about the ambivalence of not knowing what the consequences of our desires are. This takes us back to last week where I asked, why are you dreaming of labor? Why are you like why is your vision board full of different ways you can increase the value of your labor? Why is that your dream? Can you imagine anything else as being a source of joy for you? Can you bring your focus outward so that you can see the frame within which you are even being tasked with creating dreams? We create dreams with the tools that we are given, but did you know that you can imagine different tools? We dream of selves and identities with the check boxes we have been given, but did you know that you can dream of a self without those check boxes? I want to challenge you. Who are you if I take away your gender, your race, and your sexuality? If those are not options by which you can define yourself, who and what are you? If you cannot use your job, if you cannot use your income, if you cannot use where you live as a determinant of who you are, how do you define yourself? What is left when there is no race, when there is no gender, when there is no class? Who are you? Can you function, exist in your own mind without bringing the check boxes into your mind as givens? One of the things that I really loved, and I'm going to get this book off the bookshelf because I want to end by reading a passage from this book. This is, once again, The Invention of Women by, I'm going to try to say this name today, y'all, Oye Ronke Oye Wuumi. I'm going to go with that. And I just want to find this passage. This book is so good, y'all. I don't even know which one to read. Whew. So let me just give y'all just a little bit of context. The first chapter, basically, is it the first chapter or first two chapters? Basically, the first chapter of this book, Oye Ronke Oye Wu Umi, basically talks, she's exposing the framework for gender, which is that the physical body is a legitimate means by which societies can be organized, that the sense of sight is the logical and kind of morally right way to make sense of who and what people are. And so gender then becomes a what she calls a biologic, meaning that you can make assumptions about who and what people are based on what you're perceiving about them. People with penises are like this, people with vaginas or breasts are like this, and if you have neither, you don't exist. Right? You're not real, or we're going to force you into one of these containers. Right? So the author spends the beginning of this book basically rejecting that. Like, this is not a universal principle, that there are other ways to organize society. And so she talks about in Yoruba land, which is kind of pre-colonial, in Nigeria, that society was not organized. Your role, your access to power, the jobs you had was not defined by this physically so-called observed phenomenon of gender. Society was actually organized based on social facts like age. So you had seniority and hierarchy based on age, not based on gender, right? So with that being said, I'm going to pick a passage here to read. And I feel like I might have read this, but right. Okay. I'm reading from the first page. Where do I start this? Okay, I'll read this first sentence. The idea that biology is destiny, or better still, that destiny is biology, has been a staple of Western thought for centuries. Whether the issue is who in Aristotle's polis or poli, or who is poor in the late 20th century United States, the notion that difference and hierarchy in society are biologically determined continues to enjoy credence even among social scientists. In the West, biological explanations appear to be especially privileged over other ways of explaining differences of gender, race, or class. Difference is expressed as degeneration. In tracing the genealogy of the idea of generation in European thought, J. Edward Chamberlain and Sander. I'm reading all of this because I can't just hop into this one sentence I really want to read, so just bear with me, y'all. In tracing the genealogy of the idea of degeneration in European thought, J. Edward Chamberlain and Sander Gilman noted the way it was used to define certain kinds of difference in the 19th century. In particular, quote, initially degeneration brought together two notions of difference, one scientific, a deviation from an original type, and the other moral, a deviation from a norm of behavior. But they were essentially the same notion of a fall from grace. And this is the part I want to read to y'all, that I want y'all to get. But they were essentially the same notion of a fall from grace, a deviation from the original type, end quote. Consequently, those in positions of power find it imperative to establish their superior biology as a way of affirming their privileges of personhood, that's my addition, and dominance over, quote, others, end quote. Those who are different are seen as genetically inferior, and this in turn is used to account for their disadvantaged social positions. Insert here, Black people are genetically predisposed to being quicker or faster. Queer people, there's a gene or a level of testosterone in utero that is making people gay. What? All of these things to note a deviation from the norm. What is the norm? White and male. And white is really flexible too. It's not fixed in time and space. It's whatever they say it is. Whatever definition they can come up with that excludes you and erases you. You're white today, maybe not tomorrow. This behavior, way of talking, style of dress, way of forming families, gods you worship, languages you speak, dialects you speak with. Who are you without all of that? Who are you? What's left? That's all I got for today. I think I'm going to do a few readings on Clubhouse, and for the rest of y'all, I'll see y'all. Make sure you're following me on Twitter and make sure you're following me on Instagram. Sometime this week, I am going to go live on Instagram and take question and answers for the 2021 Sidereal Astrology Guide. So if you have not ordered yours, order yours today. You can order the digital download, or you can order the printed and bound version of this. So maybe I'll wait till Thursday or Friday. So order yours today. I'll ship it tomorrow, and hopefully you'll get it by the end of the week. And you can join us for a group work through session on Instagram, where I will answer your questions about how to use this. I will answer your questions about questions in the guide, and any things that you may be having challenges or issues with. I will offer you some tips on how to use this based on feedback I've gotten from other people, as well as just little things that I thought of while I was creating the 2021 Sidereal Astrology Guide, and previous ones that I didn't necessarily explicitly put in here. You can find the 2021 Sidereal Astrology Guide on my website. Go to thepeoplesoracle.com and click shop. This is a Sidereal Astrology calendar, workbook, and journal that walks you through and guides you through a personal application of this year of astrology, month by month. Each month has a theme, which you can see here at the beginning in the contents. This is March, and the theme for March is the privileges of personhood. We have all kinds of information about what is in here. The anatomy of the guide breaks down every single component of this guide, what it means and how it functions. Got definitions of what it means for each planet in transit. What are the significations of the planets? Significations for sidereal zodiac signs, significations for houses, each of the houses, people, topics, activities, and body parts. And then we get to the pages where you put in your own birth chart. So you go to the website listed here. You can print and paste your birth chart here, fill out all of these tables with the instructions given in the beginning, and then you get to filling out your guide. Each month has a monthly layout, so it's literally a calendar, and there are glyphs in each of the boxes signifying a particular astrological event. If you want to know what those are, you can go to the back where I have the year at a glance, and you just match the date with the list here, and you can know the specifics of that. Then each month has a monthly summary. I'm read from April here today. And then you have questions for each month. So for March, the questions we're asking reflect on what has transpired in your Aquarius house since May and June of 2020. So you would know what your Aquarius house is because you would have filled out the houses in my birth chart table, and then you would see which house has Aquarius, and you'd find it in the house meanings table, and then you'd know what the topics are. Then you can think back to that time period. What connections can you make between what's happening in your Taurus and Capricorn houses now in spring 2020? Again, you will know how to answer these questions either because you have the 2020 Sidereal Astrology Guide, and you can go look at that, and you can actually go back to May and June of 2020 and see what was going on in order to answer these questions. Again, this is the 2021 Sidereal Astrology Guide. The printed and bound version is available for purchase. I'm going to ship out a batch tomorrow. So if you buy it today, I will ship it tomorrow. And I am going to be offering international shipping this week, so I'm going to set that up. If you are not in the United States or Canada, I will be making sure that you can purchase this soon. All right. Instagram, it's been nice knowing y'all. Peace out. And Clubhouse, just give me a minute and I will be with you. Hold on. Y'all, my phone almost died. Let me turn off this.